Listen up, man. That Mexican bank deal's back on. We gotta move double fast.
The plan was simple.
Pack a bag, bring your 45, and be ready to roll at high noon.
But when 5 criminals headed south for the big score,
we're about to be millionaires.
Somebody changed the rules.
Vampires, Ray Bob.
Get out of there!
Robert Patrick, Tiffany Amber Thiessen, Bo Hopkins.
What in God's name is going on up there?
In a story about the folks that pop up when the sun goes down.
I just dropped in for a quick bite.
Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers. The sun is going down, and you know what that means. It's time for me to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I'm your host, Lena Nazari. Blah, blah, blah. Go to Instagram, The Beautiful Dead Podcast, or lenanazari.com if you want to reach me. If you have recommendations for movies you want me to cover, please let me know. I'm always looking for something new. We're going to jump right in, okay? Because you guys don't want to hear about my life. We did From Dusk Till Dawn last week. So I decided I was going to stick it out and I was going to watch From Dusk Till Dawn 2, which is available on Pluto TV, which is very exciting if you want to watch it. And I knew nothing about it going into it. I did not look anything up. I didn't look the vampire crossovers up until after the movie so that I could just go into it blind. So we are talking about, for anyone who hasn't listened to this podcast or watched me on YouTube, spoiler alerts. I ruin everything. Okay. We talk about it from beginning to end. So don't get mad at me if you haven't seen it and I ruin it for you. And we are talking about From Dusk Till Dawn 2, Texas Blood Money. And this was a straight-to-video one, I want to say in like 98? I don't know. I'll put it on the screen whatever time it was. I'll look it up. Robert Patrick plays Buck, and he was Jackson Hervaux in True Blood. And he was also in the Dusk Till Dawn TV show. And if you guys are like, who's Jackson Hervaux? He was Alcide's dad, the hot werewolf's dad, okay? Bo Hopkins plays Otis in this, and he was in the movie Blood Ties, which I've already done. Danny Trejo, our man, he was in this, and of course, the first one and the third one, and he was in the show, and he was in a movie called Vamp Father, which I'm going to try and find. He played himself in What We Do in the Shadows, one episode, and was in the show Blood Ties, not the movie like Bo, in the show. All right, let's do this. Right out of the gate, we open on this big city building, and inside are 2 lawyers, played by Bruce Campbell and Tiffany Amber Thiessen. I was like, what? What is this? And they're talking about working late to protect a serial killer, so clearly they're defense attorneys. They step into the elevator only to have a body fall through the roof hatch, and they're attacked by a swarm of bats. Bruce is killed. Tiffany is bitten all over. The bats bite through the steel elevator cable, which sends the elevator careening down to kill Tiffany, and all the bats escape. And I was like, what am I watching? Well, then the transition from this to the next scene is that this is a movie that this man is watching on TV, and it turns to static. And we see that a man is watching this movie while a woman is on his lap trying to get him to, work. And the man's name is Buck, and the TV is turned to static. So he flips the girl off of him and then goes up to flip through the channels. One channel shows us that a solar eclipse is happening soon, which I was like, file that away. I know that's going to apply. And then the next one is a news anchor who's telling us that a man named Luther is being hunted by law enforcement officers because he's an armed bank robber. The officer in charge is named Otis, and we find out that Otis once put Buck in prison. As they're watching the news broadcast, that officer Otis walks into Buck's home through the front door, and he's like, all right, Buck, start talking. So apparently Buck and Luther know each other. And Otis is like, you need to tell me where Luther is. I know he's reached out to you. And Buck is like, no, I've gone clean. I don't talk to Luther. And then he steals the cop's sunglasses because the cop puts them down and he steals them. Otis says, all right, whenever Luther contacts you, you need to let me know. The phone rings as the cops are leaving and they pause. And Buck is like, hi, Mom, how are you? And then the cops leave. And the girl is like, Buck, your mama's dead. And it's because it is Luther on the phone and he says the bank job is on. He says that if they do this bank job, they're going to get $5 million, and he tells Buck, round up a crew and then meet me across the border. So the next few scenes are Buck rounding up the crew, and they are a rodeo clown and safecracker who's named CW, a paranoid muscular dog fighter named Zeus. They call him Zeus. It's Jesus. It's interchangeable. And a bumbling idiot named Ray Bob that I guess Buck just has like a warm spot in his heart for, but everybody else thinks is an idiot. So Jesus picks everybody up in his car, and the car has I don't know what kind of skull this is on the front. Please, cowboys, tell me. But it's got these massive antlers on it. It looks like it might be like I don't know what it is. Anywho, it's got this huge antlers on the front, and I was like, oh, I know that's going to come into play. But Jesus is driving the car. He picks everybody up, and his license plate says, bite me. I clocked that real fast, and I appreciate a good vampire inside joke. So they cross the border into Mexico, and they stop at a motel called El Coyote, and there's a great scene where Ray Bob says to Zeus, what does El Coyote mean in American? And Jesus is like, the coyote? It's so good. And they kept calling it Mexican, not Spanish, Mexican. They'd be like, Zeus, come here in case I have to talk to this lady in Mexican. Oh boy. As they're loading into their room, they see this beautiful woman, and she's got her sights set on Zeus because he is very good looking. And she whispers into his ear, and then she takes off. They're all sitting around waiting for Luther to arrive, and they're drinking beer and watching porn. So I have to know this. Do guys sit around and just watch porn together? Is that a thing? Is that a thing? Please let me know. Meanwhile, we see Luther is heading to the motel to meet the men when this bat flies into the front of his car. And it does enough damage that it stops the car, and he lifts the hood, and the bat, which is clearly not a normal bat, comes out at him, and he shoots it, and then he walks to this nearby bar because his car is no longer drivable. And the bar is the Titty Twister from our first one. A girl is dancing with a snake, and I do love a good homage. Clearly that's an homage to the first one. And as he walks in, the disco ball falls and almost hits him. And then who do we see behind the bar? But our friend Danny Trejo is back. He's playing the same character, and I guess we're just supposed to ignore that he died in the first one, which, fine by me.
Say, what'd be the odds of getting a cab out here?
Odds of getting a cab are about 0 to none. No cabs come out here.
Luther asks Danny, can I order a cab? And Danny's like, no cab is coming out here. So Danny offers to drive him to his motel when he's done with work in 30 minutes. So Luther calls the motel and tells his men, I'll be there as soon as possible. I had car trouble. Danny is giving Luther a ride, and he asks about this bat that supposedly attacked Luther. And Luther explains he shot the bat, which pisses Danny off real fast.
Pump the bullet in the bastard.
So he realizes then that they're not headed in the opposite direction. They're headed back to his car. So they show up at the car that Luther was driving, and Danny gets out and says, where's the bat? And he's looking for the bat that Luther killed. We see a blood trail, which Danny follows into the darkness of the desert. and he's saying, Victor, Victor. And then suddenly a man who's like wheezing and bloody comes stumbling out of the darkness and up to Danny. And Victor points at Luther and says, that's him. And then he pulls the bullet out of his chest and says, I think this is yours. And then he passes out.
I think this belongs to you.
So then Danny vamps out and Luther starts to shoot him and Danny disappears into the darkness. So, all right, vampire pause. The vampires can shift into bats, then look human, then look like human vampire hybrid, then like vampire human bat hybrid. So there's like these different things that they can shift into. When Danny vamps out, he has 2 sharp fangs, but we know from the first movie, I don't know if we should even reference the first movie, but we know from the first movie that clearly there's like all these different species of vampires in this universe. But then again, Danny died in the first one. So either this happened prior to the first movie or same universe, different story. Either way, I just thought I should mention that. All right, so Luther starts to walk down the road, like very calmly for a guy that was just attacked by 2 men. And then we see boots walking behind him, and then the boots lift up from the ground, and then we hear a bat wings, and then Luther's being chased by a bat. He shoots the bat, which falls to the road, but rallies and starts to chase him again. He gets into the car, but the first vamp climbs into the car and bites him, and then we cut to the motel. At the motel, they're still waiting for Luther, and Jesus decides he's going for a walk. He's very tense. Clearly, this character is like the on-edge, half-crazy character. He actually heads to hook up with the hot girl from earlier. Afterwards, she gets into the shower, and a bat is seen outside the shower curtain. It attacks her in the shower, and he sleeps through her screaming and then being bitten. And we get this like beautiful Psycho reference of like the blood going down, and it's clearly an homage to Psycho. Now Zeus wakes up from his nap and he's getting dressed when the shower suddenly shuts off. So obviously that alerts us to something being wrong because we know that she was just attacked. Then Luther steps out of the bathroom and Zeus is like, bro, what are you doing here? And Luther's like, I just came in for a quick bite. But he vamps out and then throws Zeus around the room, but Zeus pulls a Bible and Luther recoils. So we know that the vampires can be repelled by holy items. Zeus locks himself in the bathroom just in time for the girl to rise from the bath behind him. So we know that it is a 1 bite is all it takes situation, and apparently they turn rather quickly. She tries to bite Jesus, and in the tussle, we see that she casts no reflection in the mirror. He uses a piece of broken glass to slice her head off and then jumps through the window, but outside Luther is standing and waiting and attacks him, and the 2 men start fighting when they're seen by the motel owner. So now we follow away from the fight. We follow the motel owner who's running in, calls the police and says, I see that guy you're looking for. He's here at my motel. But then Luther attacks her and kills her. Luther and Zeus then enter into the room of the rest of the team. So CW, Ray Bob, and what was his name? What was his name? CW, Buck. CW, Ray Bob, and Buck are sitting there as Zeus and Luther walk in, and they look totally normal except for the fact that they're a little bit pale. So we know they're vampires, but the men don't. They start planning this bank heist, which he wants to pull off that night. And the rest of the team doesn't think that's a great idea, and they want time to prepare, but Luther basically says, you can do it tonight or you can walk away from $5 million. So now we see them in the car headed to the location, and Luther is putting sun-blocking tint on the windows of the car. So we know that he plans to like get away in this car at some point, and he's preparing for the sunlight. Which is pretty smart. But like, did you stop and buy that? Meanwhile, cops arrive at the motel because she called 911, and they see the dead girl in the bathtub, and we get a reference to the first movie because Otis explains that one of the deputies who had to run out of the room is still trying to get over the fact that the Gecko boys killed his father. So it's happened very closely to the first one. So either the geckos had just started killing, this happens, and then the first one happens, or the first one has already happened, but they reference it. Our 5 criminals are now behind the bank and they're about to rob it. Luther leaves the group, turns into a bat, flies down an air shaft into the bank. He then kills a security guard, gets the keys, and then lets the other men in. And I'm like, I guess being a vampire would probably make crime really easy, huh? So now Buck and Raybob keep watch, and Luther disables the alarm, and then CW starts to work on the safe. So CW and Luther are in the back. In the front, Buck and Raybob are looking out the window, and then sitting at the desk that the security guard used to be at is Jesus, and he's just like reading a magazine. When we see CW starting to work on the safe, Luther comes up behind him, but the safe handle is across. So Luther reacts and he throws a jacket over it, and then he tells CW it's just an asthma attack. But while Luther watches CW work on the safe, CW pulls the jacket off and reveals the cross. So then Luther vamps out, and as they struggle, they set off the bank alarm. Jesus hears a police siren, because now the police are being drawn to the bank because of the alarm. Buck wants to run, and he runs to tell Luther and CW they need to go. But now we see that CW has bite marks, so he must be turned, and he is working on the safe, and he's like, I'm not going anywhere. Buck tells Raybob, we need to get out of here now. Zeus says, I don't care what you two do, but I'm staying. Buck and Raybob run out of the bank and straight into the police, who now fire on them, so they have to run back into the bank. The entire Mexican police force has shown up at this bank and is surrounding this bank. It's crazy the amount of cruisers that are there. Otis, who has been searching for Luther, also arrives. He calls into the bank to talk to the men. Jesus answers and tells him Buck is here. Buck gets on the phone with Otis, who tells Buck, man, Buck, you really messed up bad this time. And he's like, I want to talk to the security guard that's inside of there. So Jesus pretends to be the guard and speaks in Spanish and says, like, I am okay, the men are okay to me. As Buck is asking for time to flee with the guard, he's like trying to negotiate for time. Zeus just snaps, he hangs up the phone, he attacks Buck. The phone rings again, and Zeus just cuts the phone line, because Zeus was crazy before he was a vampire. So now the officers are moving up. 2 officers move up to the roof of the bank, and they're trying to plan a way to get in. CW opens the safe, and they start filling bags with cash. The cops throw a gas grenade down through the air vent into the bank. So Luther throws it back up and then turns into a bat and like flies through the smoke up the air vent and kills the 2 cops. Buck is starting to suspect something is wrong, but he can't really say anything to Raybob in front of the others. Meanwhile, a sniper climbs onto the roof of the building next door, and Luther kills him too right away. He's killing humans so fast. So CW tells Raybob, hey, I need a hand with all the bags. And just as Luther's returning, Buck sees that Jesus has no reflection in the computer monitor screen, but he still is not saying anything. He snaps, he freaks out, he pulls a gun on everybody. He tells Raybob, you need to come to me, get away from those guys. And then he tells Luther, Zeus, and CW, throw your guns over here. And then he says to Raybob, they're vampires. So we're an hour in, just like the first one, we're an hour in before we get the word vampires. And our our anti-hero, quickly figures out what is going on. So he, like us, knows all about vampires, and he knows how to spot them. Well, while he's talking to Raybob shows us that he's been turned, and he tries to bite Buck. So Buck fires on the vampires, but it does nothing. He fires into him, it does nothing. So he locks himself in a janitor's closet and then uses a broken mop handle to make a cross. He opens the door and drives the vampires back into the safe. And I think the plan was to lock them in the safe, but then the cops throw more of those smoke bombs in there. So now the bank is full of smoke. So Buck just has like a cross, but it's smoky. He can't see where the vampires are. So they just like come out of the smoke at him, but he's able to drive them away with a cross. But eventually that's not going to work anymore because they're going to do it. They're just going to get you from all sides at the same time. And then somebody stabs him in the calf. Oh, anything with like Achilles being cut, calves being stabbed, that makes me cringe because I don't think that you can run with a stabbed calf. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments. So Buck jumps through the glass front door and he's cuffed by the cops, and he's trying to tell them that all the men inside are vampires. And he says to him like, I never thought I'd be so happy to see you guys. So he's trying to tell them like, don't go in there, but nobody's listening to him. And they put him in the back of the cop car. They lock him in the back of the cop car. He's cuffed. And we see a bunch of the cops head into the bank, and he's screaming, don't go in there, don't go in there. But the cops head into the smoky bank, and then we hear gunfire and screaming, and then a head is thrown out the front window at the remaining officers outside. Inside, we see the vampires are feeding on all of these dead police officers. Outside, the sun rises, so all the vamps like start to retreat back into the safe. And Buck is so excited, but guess what? What happened in the beginning? There was a news thing about how the solar eclipse was coming. So, as quickly as the sun rises, then the eclipse happens and the sun is now covered. So, the 4 vampires come out of the bank and they're armed and they're vamped out. And it's actually a really, really good shot. They start firing on everybody, and the cops are firing back, but it doesn't matter. They hit every vampire multiple times. It doesn't matter. So they shoot the vampires over and over and over again. The vampires just keep walking. And as the vamps run out of ammo, they just start heading into the crowd and just start killing officers with their bare hands. Buck is begging to be taken out of the cuffs because now the windows have been shot out, so it's going to be very easy for the vampires to get to him, and he knows they're going to get to him. Finally, Otis is listening to him, finally, and he takes off the cuffs. There is a great moment of the last of the cops being wiped out by the vamps, and it's all done in this shot of the side of the bank, and it's just shadows. So you get to see like the last of the cops being wiped out, but it's like a shadow play. It's a really good shot. So now we are down to Otis, the head Mexican police officer, and Buck against the 4 vampires. The good guys use their shotguns and billy clubs to make crosses, and they're driving the vampires back. But unfortunately, now all of the bitten police officers start to rise. So very quickly, they are getting sorely outnumbered by vampires. So one of them gets staked. We finally see it. They turn to goo. So we know what happens to that vampire, at least, when they're staked. Our first main vampire to die is CW. He is staked by Otis and again sort of melts into a goop. Buck throws Jesus onto the antlers on the front of his car, which I knew was going to happen. Clocked that one right out of the gate, and he melts. So it's pretty consistently in this world. Luther and Otis are fighting, and Buck throws this lead pipe to him to help him when he gets attacked by the vampire Raybob. Luther and Raybob decide to run before the eclipse is over. So they're all fighting, and then Luther says to Raybob, like, we need to run before this sun is uncovered. And they jump into the car, but Luther is staked from behind by Buck, who was hiding in the back seat. So the only vampire left at this point is Raybob. And it's a showdown between Buck and Raybob because Otis got hurt pretty bad when he was fighting Luther. But the eclipse is ending, the sun is coming out, so Raybob starts to run around the corner of the building. Buck grabs the sunglasses that he stole from Otis in the beginning and uses them to reflect the sun from off the sun, obviously. Reflects that sunlight right towards Raybob, and he lights him on fire, and he bursts into flames and then ends up like a blackened, charred, steaming skeleton. Buck and Otis have a conversation about quitting smoking, and Otis lets Buck make a run for it before the other, officers see him because we can hear the police cars approaching. So Otis lets Buck make a run for it, and that is how our movie ends. Let's talk about tropes I love and tropes I hate. I hate the fast sunrise. I hate it. If you want to incorporate the sunrise, you can start hinting at it earlier, but I hate the fast sunrise. And even worse, in this one, we get a fast eclipse. Anyone who has watched an eclipse knows they are achingly slow. So, like, a fast sunrise is not bad enough. Now we get a fake fast eclipse. Just awful, awful. I do like the idea of incorporating an eclipse, like a couple hours where vampires get to be free and they normally don't. It's kind of like when they did 30 Days a Night in Alaska. So I do like that idea, but you can't have it happen fast. You just can't. I hate one bite is all it takes. We've talked about this. And we have talked about this last week. I love a vampire run business in order to, lure in victims in sort of a quiet, easy way. And of course, the titty twister. We love the titty twister. It's a quick scene in this one. I guess they couldn't afford to do more scenes, but I just loved the quick minute we got. I also love the idea of vampires using their powers to pull off crime. I don't condone it, but also I do love that idea. Let's explore that a little more, like a vampire criminal. Like a vampire bank robber. Let's talk about that more. All right, let's talk about how sexy or alluring the vampires of From Dusk Till Dawn 2. They get their honorary vamp point, but that's really it. I mean, much like last week, they're not going to have sex with you, and we didn't really get any sexiness at all. So the one sex scene we got was actually between two humans, and once she turned, she just wanted to kill him. So clearly they don't really care about sex. They might lure you in with sex, but then they're just going to eat you. So we'll give them 1 out of 10 onks for sexiness and allure. Now, how scary or evil are the vampires of From Dusk Till Dawn 2? They're very strong. They're difficult to kill. We've seen that with how many times they were shot. They don't care about humans at all. And we get to see this in the fact that once they're turned, they're like ready to eat their best friend. So they have no respect for human life. And Ray Bob starts as just this like sweet, dopey character, and he is all about killing once he gets turned. They are bound by the sun, and holy objects do repel them, so they do lose points for that. But I think I'm going to stick with what I did last week, and I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10 stakes to the heart for scariness and evil. All right, my thoughts. This movie had no business being as fun as it was. It was so much fun. I did not expect it. I haven't watched this movie all these years because I thought it was going to be god awful. But at this point, I've watched so many terrible, terrible vampire movies that I thought it was fitting to just go ahead and watch it, especially because I watched the first one last week. It was so much fun. It felt like a 90s Tales from the Crypt episode. It really did. It felt like that, but just an hour and a half long. The quick cameo from Bruce Campbell, wow, chef's kiss. Like, to do that 2 minutes in, you know you're gonna rope people in by doing that. The actors were fantastic. I absolutely love Raymond Cruz in everything that he does, even if he's like a really horrible person like he was in Breaking Bad when he played Tuco. I just think he's such a good actor. Robert Patrick, also, like, what a good actor. It's hard to not see T-1000 when you look at him, but I always thought he was a very good actor. The writing is like goofy and fun, but it does what it should do, which is it doesn't take itself seriously at all. I mean, if you're a 90s direct-to-video horror movie, then you can't take yourself very seriously, and I think that's why I loved it so much. It is what it is, right? I mean, I absolutely think I would watch this again. You have to separate it from its predecessor. I will say that. That was Tarantino. This one is not, okay? Totally different. So it's the same universe, but we're just gonna assume this is a completely different take on that universe, okay? I would love to have like a 90s party and just have this on in the background. I think that would be so much fun. I will probably tell my friends to watch it. If you haven't seen it, it is streaming on Pluto, and even though you just watched me talk about it, it's totally worth a watch. I would absolutely go watch it. And while you're on Pluto, watch number 3, because that is what we are doing next week. I love you all. I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.
And big finish. Thank you.